Good morning, Professor Riley and students of CSC436. My name is Scott Soffer, and I'd like to share with you my final project for the class. For my project, I've developed a mean stock portfolio manager. Before diving into the web app itself, I'd like to walk you through the architecture very briefly. So, as a mean application, or using the mean stack, it's using all the mean components. The first tier or component is actually Angular 2, as you all know. And here I wanted to share with you some of the components I've developed. On the left, you'll see we've got a component which provides authentication and user registration for new users. There's also components to view a portfolio, manage the stocks in that portfolio, and you can also research new stocks. Other components in the application are more service-based components. So all of the retrieval of stock information is provided by a third-party API called Market on Demand. And so to access the Market on Demand API, I've developed a quote service which retrieves quotes for a given stock. There's a lookup service which allows you to get a stock symbol for a given company name. And finally, there's a chart data service, which says for a given symbol and time period, return the price history in an array. That price history array can then be used to pass into a charting component. And finally, there's a persistence service, which allows you to persist this information in the MongoDB itself, so it handles the database interaction. The next tier in the application is actually Express, right? Here's where I've implemented RESTful APIs. Examples of some of the APIs that I've implemented are, there's a Get API where you can get the stocks for a given user. There's a Delete API which says delete a given stock. There's a Put API to put a new user into the database. And there's also a Post API to post a new stock into a portfolio. The third tier is obviously Node.js, right, which provides us the JavaScript runtime. And then the fourth and final tier is MongoDB, which is a NoSQL database. And this allows me to persist the stock portfolios for a given set of users. And so this is truly a multi-user application. We can create as many users as we want, and all users will have a separately maintained portfolio. And here's an example of a user portfolio document that's persisted in MongoDB. And so this is the document itself. It has several properties. So the first property is the user. Next property is password. You can see here it's really not encrypted. That would be a future enhancement. The third property is called stocks, and that's actually the portfolio for a given user. Within the stocks property, we have several sub-properties where the property would be a stock symbol, and then the value would be quote details, or details for that stock, such as its symbol, what the original purchase price, the quantity purchased, the date, and then the last two properties, current price and quote, are set up null initially because those are updated in real time whenever we display a stock. So here's an example of a document for Scott's, myself, where I've got two stocks. So at a high level, that's a system architecture, and as we walk through the demo, you'll see various parts of this, but I thought it would be good to walk you through the big picture before we dive in. So with that, let's go ahead and start. First off, I'm going to go ahead and start up the various components in the system. I'm first going to start up MongoDB, so it's the command is actually mongod starts a Mongo daemon. Next, I'm going to start the Node.js application, which is the mean stock server. So here we see the mean stock server starting up. Down here in this bottom right window, actually, I've got just a Mongo shell application so I can query information. Here you can see where I've actually queried a portfolio for a user, and this is actually helpful in the development and debugging. Over here, actually, I have the Angular 2 application. To save time, I started it up ahead of time. But so everything is running now, we should be able to go in and start the application. So here is, let me go ahead and click on a URL so you can see it refreshed. So right now, I've just launched my application, so the mean stock portfolio manager. The first screen we come in is the login screen. So on login, You see we have a login form with two fields, username and password. It uses form level validation. So various options to log in or register new users are not enabled until the form components are verified. And also you see navigation links. And these links are not enabled right now because a user has not logged in. They're all user-centric. So here's where I've implemented authentication guards around these routes to make sure that they're not accessible until you've logged in. So I'm going to go ahead and log in an existing user. I'm going to log in myself, and we can see my existing password. Now that the form's authenticated, the form is valid, actually I can go ahead and log in. And the first screen we come to is this portfolio overview, where you see the various stocks in my portfolio. You can see I can actually click on any stock if I want to drill down for more detail. There's also the first requirement for the final project, some kind of a graphing component. Here's where I'm graphing via high charts the distribution of stocks in my portfolio. As you all know, you should have a diversified portfolio. You don't want all your money in one stock. So lets me see kind of the value of any given stock in my portfolio as against the whole. So, Google is about 55% of my portfolio. LifeLock is 22, and other random ones. So that's a high chart, bar chart. Now, if I go ahead and click on any given stock, you can actually drill down for more detail about that stock. So I clicked on BA, and that exposed then the current quote for Boeing. So here's where we went out to a Market on Demand API and got a quote for Boeing. This quote displays the last price, it displays the change, market cap, volume, etc., kind of all the key details. There's also the quote history or price history for Boeing. So this was another API from Market on Demand where I went out and requested 1 year's worth of price history. It returns the stock price and dates in an array, and then I pass this into high charts as a kind of a line chart, and it produces this various nice graph. So, and of course, you can go back and click on any data you want and see their price history. So now I just selected LifeLock. The graph updated with LifeLock's current price. They're currently soaring because of buyout rumors. That's who I currently work for, so that's super exciting. But that's kind of the overview component. Before I dive into the next, I wanted to actually start from scratch with a new user. So I'm going to, at this point, log out. Here you see a logout screen, and there's actually a redirect going on. So now I'm being redirected back to the login. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a new user. So let's call this new user Pete. And I got to make sure I remember that. Pete's going to have a password of password so I don't screw up. Now I can go ahead and register new user. Here we get a message that says registration was successful. Now I can log in using my username and password. So I'm going to go ahead and log in Pete. Pete as password. And now you can log in. And here we go. We have an empty application because there are no stocks in Pete's portfolio because he's a brand new user. So with that, we can go ahead and proceed to the next step. So what do you do now? A typical user would probably want to research some stocks. Now that I've logged in, you actually see all these links are valid. So now I can go ahead and click on research stocks. And here we come up with a dialog that says, enter a company name, and it'll pull up some options for you. So this uses that stream we used in class earlier. So I'm going to start typing in, and you see as I type in, the list of options starts getting narrower down. And so typing in John, all of a sudden I get some options here. Oh, let's go John. I can click on any one of these if I think I want to, explore that as a stock. Let's look at J&J, Johnson & Johnson. I drilled on that, or I selected on that, and now I get a current quote for Johnson & Johnson, just like we saw on the overview screen, and also get the 1 year price history. Maybe I want to look at another one. Let's back out and just type in some other terms here, JET, and I see, oh, JetBlue is interesting. Let's go ahead and click on JetBlue, and of course, the quote is updated automatically. Likewise, the chart data is updated automatically. So this shows you the research information. Now from there, if you've done your research, you can say, boy, I've got a couple stocks that I want to go ahead and purchase. You might purchase them through an online company, at which point you can then add them into your portfolio. So to do that, you use the Manage Portfolio option. Now here it's empty, so now I'm going to add a new stock. And I just looked at Johnson & Johnson, so I think that was J&J. And let's say I bought 100 shares, and the current price that we saw today was $24. And I'm going to enter in today 11/15/2016. And lo and behold, now we have Johnson & Johnson. And let's say that I might want to add one more. Let's add Boeing because I think they were pretty cool. $30, and I'm going to buy 200 of those guys. And let's say that, actually they were in my old portfolio and I want to migrate them into my new portfolio. So I'm going to say that they were kind of a retroactive purchase from 2014. There. Now I've got a couple stocks in the portfolio. Once you do that, you see there's other options that are enabled. You can, of course, update something if you miskeyed some information. In this case, look at I bought 23 shares of Johnson & Johnson. That's not an even lot. You get a better price if you buy a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and update Johnson & Johnson. The price is really unchanged, so I'm going to keep that as 100. But the quantity actually was 200, and I got to go back. I bought them today, so that's 11/15/2016. 2016. And now you can update them, and immediately we see them. They're updated. And let's say that I really didn't buy Boeing. I want to go ahead and delete them. So now I've managed my portfolio. You can go back to the portfolio overview and see the changes come into effect. So now I have one stock in my portfolio, Johnson & Johnson. Yeah, it represents 100% of my portfolio. Not very diversified. I probably should change that. And of course, I can drill down on that like before and see the information. So that's managing. The next one we go to would be the About option. So everybody has to have an About page. So here's my me portfolio manager. There's me. I'm calling to you from sunny San Diego, California. I would rather be on the ocean, but lo and behold, we have a week or so left of class. And with that, then the last thing you can do is log out. And I mentioned that's just redirects you, turns off the authentication, etc. So there. Now maybe I'd like to share with you a couple technical highlights. So I'm going to hide this, zip over into Visual Studio, and where I've got some of my things set up. First, I talked about the route guard. So let me show you the app module. Here I have my routing set up, and here's where I've got guards set up for each one of my key routes. And so you have to have guards around anything that's portfolio user specific. Things like login or a page not found are not user specific, so they're not guarded. And then what does the guard itself do? So that's implemented over here in auth guard. There was an example online for this. It's pretty straightforward. Here's where you can say, hey, it just really checks with the authentication service if the user is logged in. So if the user is logged in, then the can activate method returns true. If you're not logged in, you pass through, then it simply navigates you back to the login page and returns false. So a very simple guard on the routes. Something else to look at would be the overview page. So this, I think you've seen this stuff before, where you retrieve a bunch of data and you display it in a form in a table. Nothing super rocket science about that. I did want to show with you when we have a portfolio, we would retrieve a portfolio from MongoDB. Here's where we're calling a portfolio service to get a portfolio. Next, you have to iterate through the portfolio and update the stocks in the portfolio with a quote. So here's where we're iterating through all the keys or stocks in my portfolio. And then for each one, we go out to a portfolio service and we get a new price. So that's where we're going here. So now we get a new quote. Then we add that quote to the object. So that's kind of the overview. And then something else to note, once we've updated the quotes, I now want to go to the pie chart. But the pie chart can't be displayed until all the prices are coming in. And so I've kind of labeled this with a little bit of a hack alert, because I have to arbitrarily wait a couple of seconds and gamble that all of the quoting will be updated, at which point I can go ahead and start getting my chart data and building the chart. So that's what's going on here. And that's kind of the overview. Highlights from stock display. So let me go back up here. You notice that we had a couple other templates that get displayed. If you click on any one of these guys, there's a click. Then you actually can drill down and go into this new stock display component. So if you go into the stock display component, you see, what are we seeing in stock display component? We are seeing where actually I am on initializing. I've got to, again, get some quotes because I want to display that more detailed chart history. So that's what's going on in the stock display. I'm running out of time. It's at my 15 minutes. Other components, let's see, that might be of interesting. Add form. So when we added a new stock, something that I had to do here was actually use an output decorator, because the user could, they're in a new component, this add form component. If they click cancel or they complete it, I want to tell the parent form, which is the managed form, to hide itself. So here's where I utilize the output decorator. I thought that was kind of pretty fun. And there's using events and event emitters. In the research component, we shared with you the fact that we're using the streams. We used those in a prior example in class, so that's all pretty straightforward. Here's one I wanted to share with you. On the logout form, how did I handle that redirect? Well, here's where, when it's initialized, I set a timeout for 4 seconds. And so for 4 seconds, it'll display this message. Then when the 4 seconds is complete, it invokes the navigate method. The navigate method just sends you back to the login. So that's how the logout happens. And then, of course, we have an authentication service. This is where we're reaching out to MongoDB to do some authentication. And it asks Mongo, just are the username and passwords matching? Here, if they're matching, no, that's not where the matching is, but there's matching in here that says, if they're valid or not, then we obviously decide whether to log in. So that's this kind of stuff here. And then there's some market on demand APIs. Here's a quote service where I'm going into market on demand. I'm getting a quote. I have to set some parameters in the query, my symbol and a callback. Then you process that. That's quote. There's also the lookup that says, lookup for a given string. So that's what we're doing. And then there's finally, there's a chart data service. Then lastly, I wanted to share with you Node.js. I'm over time, so I'm going to end this quickly. Here's where I've implemented all of my RESTful APIs. I've actually got a way to initialize a portfolio with myself. Here's where I'm setting up my Mongo client, and then here's where I'm implementing methods. So I can authenticate a user, I can get portfolios for users, add stocks, etc. But that's where all the RESTful APIs was. It was a ton of fun. And this has been an awesome project. I hope you enjoyed this brief presentation. And I look forward to working with all of you in other classes. And thank you again, Professor. It's been an outstanding class. Bye-bye.